Hello, everybody, and welcome to this workshop. It's an absolute honor to be here today. I'm a long way from home. I'm from England, so it's a bit of a long flight, but it was one of those things you absolutely have to come along to. As soon as I was offered the opportunity to come and speak to everyone, it was an absolute no-brainer. It is a huge, huge honor to be here today. So this workshop is going to be on clean sport. Now, there's a lot of aspects to that. We're going to touch on a few different things today. But first off, my name is Toby Atkins. I am an ex-professional cyclist, so I have peed in a lot of cups in my time. Never kept track, but I'm assuming probably 100 to 150 times I've been tested. And the first time I got tested, I was 17 years old, and it wasn't a great experience. It was, I just finished my first national championships. I was third, so I was relatively happy. But I got pulled aside for doping testing, and to start with, I was really, really quite proud of myself, because the first time you get tested, you're thinking, yes, you know, I'm good enough that I'm at the point where I'm being drug tested. That's an amazing feeling. So I went to the doping control station, and they went through all the paperwork and the sitting down, explaining things, and you soon realize that no one actually tells you a lot about this stuff until you go and you're in a doping control station. And I realized I was nervous. I was really, really quite nervous. I can remember standing up and going to the bathroom with this person I'd never met before, and it was weird. It was uncomfortable. It's hard to explain, but because no one tells you about it, you have no idea what to expect. And because of that, my first time, it took me 2.5 hours to go to the toilet when I went in my first test. And ideally, I'd like everyone here today to think that once we've been through all of this, it's a lot simpler. I promise you it's not scary, and genuinely, it's not that bad. You're not going to have the same experience as me nowadays, hopefully, because you've listened to me here today. So I would love to start off with, has anyone else had to pee in a cup before? Has anyone else been drug tested for sport? We've got a couple over, we've got one over here. Yeah? Got a few. I know we've probably got a few online as well. So you guys probably know what it's like. You've probably been through a fair few things. We've got some experienced people in the room, and that's a great, great start. Now, the next thing is, most people, when I come to these things, expect me to just talk about drugs for about an hour. And that's not really why I'm here. Yes, there's certainly a part of that. Of course, that is a good chunk of what I'm going to talk to you about today. But there's a lot more to clean sport. There's the values behind it. There's fair play. There's dedication. There's success. There's so much that sport's got to offer, and clean sport involves all of that. So I suppose in a kind of summarizing way, what I'm here to do is to tell you about how to protect yourself, your career, your sport, and your family and friends, because sport really is something that's going to unify us like nothing else will in life. It's a really special thing. So guys, just to kind of get a gauge on the room, I'm going to ask you some questions. So first of all, does anyone know what doping is? If you can raise a hand if anyone knows. If not, yeah, we've got a few. Any idea? Got any? What's your definition of doping?
It's basically whether you're participating in sport and you're taking substances that are not acceptable, so then you can doping.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's taking things that aren't allowed within sport, exactly. So I like to think of it as a couple of different things, really. So by the dictionary definition, now the term doping refers to the use of prohibited medications, drugs, or treatments by athletes with the intention of improving athletic performance. That's a bit complicated, it gets a bit full on. I like to just think of it as quite simply cheating, right? So yes, you can take drugs, that's cheating, but there's so many other forms of doping as well. There's, if you took a shortcut in a running race, there's, if you're using equipment that's not allowed in your sport, there's so many things that are also essentially doping, and all it is cheating. So that's my best way of explaining of doping, is all it is. It's quite simply cheating. Now, the first activity I'd like to do with you guys is actually one it's quite a nice one, to be fair. So I want you guys to imagine your guys' sporting idol. I want you guys to picture them in your head, and I want you to think about what makes them your idol. Yeah? I want you to think really deeply about it, because this is actually something that's quite important. Now, whilst you're doing that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my idol. So his name is Geraint Thomas. He is a very, very good professional cyclist. He's won the Tour de France before. But the interesting thing about him is he's not the best in the world physically. He is, don't get me wrong, he's a very, very good athlete. But he's never going to be, he's not quite the physical specimen that the best in the world is. So the thing that made him win the Tour de France was the values behind what he put into his work, his absolute dedication, his willingness to kind of sacrifice certain elements of his life, his willingness to absolute drive for success. And that's something that really, really matters to me. When I was doing my sport, it was something that I was 100% focused on. And I imagine you guys probably are the same in your sport as well. The absolute level of drive needed is something that really fuels me. And so that's why he's my idol. So these things are basically all they are characteristics about the kind of person they are. But it's also a case of these are what we call sporting values. So anti-doping in general, or in fact clean sport in general, is built on these sport values. So you've got a couple on the screen. There is obviously a lot more than this, but these are the ones that I tend to kind of come back to over and over again. And these are what all the rules are made of, or made up of. They all tie in together. So at the top, we've got ethics, we've got fair play, honesty, dedication, commitment, courage, teamwork, excellence, solidarity, and community. And now, your idol that you just imagined just before has probably got quite a few elements of these within themselves, or you would describe them as one of these things. And that's exactly why they're so successful, because they follow the spirit of sport, the values around it all. And that is essentially what we're going to talk a lot about today, is the values behind sport and how that impacts on decision-making and vulnerable situations and how that makes you as a person or as an athlete in general. There's so many things that tie into this. So, like I just said, we're going to touch on some difficult conversations. And the first one we're going to touch on is the fact that occasionally doping does happen. It's unfortunate within sport. It's not a nice thing. I myself in my career was victim to people that were doping around me, and it cost me results. It's a horrible feeling. And I kind of break it down into a couple of different types of people. And so we call this doping and the ideal athlete. So there's two types of people. The first one is someone that's willing to win at absolutely all costs. So this is the person that's willing to cheat. This is the person that's willing to ruin relationships. This is the person that's willing to hurt people's feelings. It's the kind of person that really is just absolutely driven to success and will do anything. Now, the second type is being the best you can be. And this is the kind of person that really ties in the clean sport values. Now, being the best you can be is obviously the ethical right, the correct decision to make, but it's also to do with the way you think and how that affects your performance as well. So if you just want to win, that's fantastic. I'm sure every athlete here wants to win, right? I mean, I know that I spent my entire career trying to win. I did a few times. Didn't all the time, but did win a few times. But once you've won, there's no more motivation in your head if that's all you're thinking about is winning. Once you've done that, it's going to kind of get a little bit old. Whereas being the best you can be, imagine if you're the best in the world and you've already beaten everyone, so what's left to do? Well, if you're the kind of person that's focusing on being the best athlete they can be, well, then you've always got the motivation to push on and do one step more and be better in everything you do. And so that's the kind of athlete we all want to try and focus to be on. Now, obviously, there's the type of person that's willing to win at all costs. And there's a certain level of decision-making that goes along with that. And although I think it's not a particularly enjoyable thing to talk about, it is something that's probably worth speaking about, is a sense that people are tempted to dope, and that's okay. Like, we're all vulnerable human beings at times in our life. That's a part of being a human. So what I'd like to do is just highlight some of these key parts or key times when you may be feeling vulnerable, or those key decision-making steps that you need to be aware of. And the first one is, it's very rare that someone wakes up in the morning and goes, right, I'm going to start doping today. It's not like that. No one just kind of goes, right, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. It's a result of many different factors piling up over time, things, stress building up, and maybe lack of success, or maybe you've got an injury. There's so many things that feed into this like decision-making process. And so it becomes really quite complex. And these vulnerabilities can really set around justifying doping in your head. And what we want to try and do is teach you guys about knowing when these vulnerable moments are, so that you can see them and say, right, actually, this is the time I need to think about my values, what they mean to me, and how they're going to affect other people around me as well. So let's talk about some of those vulnerable moments, because I know from my experience in sport, I've experienced all of these, and I'll be honest with everyone here, there's been times in my career where I was like, you know what, I have no idea what I'm going to do to get back from this, because for every high we have in sport, there's an equal low. And I think probably everyone in this room knows that, and I think everyone online probably also knows that as well. So those low moments, they can be a range of different things. Changing clubs or training environment. If you've gone from, let's say, you've moved teams, you've just gone to a completely new team, you've got a new contract somewhere else, you've moved towns, moved locations, you're eager to please, right? You're really like fighting to get to that next step. And it's important, of course it is, absolutely. But there's that temptation there just because you need to prove yourself. The next one is a big one, particularly the people we're talking to today. I mean, entering a higher level of competition. There is going to be a point in people's careers where they go from a junior athlete to a senior athlete or to an under-23 athlete or whatever it may be. And entering that higher level of competition is actually quite mentally straining, right? I can remember when I went from being a junior to my first elite pro race. As a junior, I'd be top 3 or winning everything I did. It was fantastic. I thought I was amazing, right? But I got to the next level of sport, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, God, I'm fighting to get top 20. Like, it's hard. Like, it's a whole nother game. And you've got to realize that entering a higher level of competition, it fuels that, oh, I've got to get back to that winning kind of point. So it's a vulnerable time. Next one is loss in competition. And now there's a room full of very successful, very young athletes here. And I imagine the same also on our online system as well. And however successful an athlete is, they've also experienced loss. And if you haven't, you probably will at some point. There's no way around it. It's going to happen. So loss in competition is hard. It's not nice. No one enjoys it. We don't set out to do it. But it happens. And when you do lose, you feel really quite just down. It's hard to deal with. You look back and you're thinking, was there anything else I could have done to not lose so I could have won? And then eventually you get to the point of like, well, maybe I just need to be better. And those vulnerable thoughts can really start to take toll over time. So it's a vulnerable time. Now, the pressure to win is a big one. Some of you guys may be aware, obviously, the financial side of sport is at times tough, right? There's things like getting your funding and things. I know in cycling, my job was at risk every 12 months, right? I had contracts to hit. And every year I get to the point of, well, I best start winning some races soon, otherwise I'm not going to have a job next year. So there's that absolute push. There's so much pressure to win all the time. And then if you're not winning, that's when your head starts to tick and go like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And you've got to fall back on the values. And lastly, of course, is injuries. These are not a lot of fun to deal with, mainly because if you're going downhill like this, everyone else is going uphill like this, it sucks, man. It's really, really hard because you can't get better any quicker than your body's going to get better, right? It just is what it is. And seeing everyone else improve is tough. And that's when you start thinking, well, is there anything I can do to hurry this process up? Like, I'm already doing all the physio work. I'm already doing all of the different therapy types. I'm going to the doctors. I'm doing all the things that I can do. Is there something I can take to speed this up? And it's those kind of thoughts you've really got to be aware of. You've got to understand that, yeah, you'll have them. It's normal to have them. We're all very competitive. It's why we're all here. We're all incredibly competitive at what we do, and we're all very good at it. The key is remembering to think about it as well. So coming back to the start, there's two types of success in sport. There's the person that's winning at all costs. You don't want to be that person. And there's the person that focusing on being the best they can be. And that's motivation that will take you from grassroots sport to Olympic champions. And I can tell you now, I've met a lot of Olympic gold medalists, and not a single one of them has a goal of simply winning, right? The best thing is being the best you can be, because you don't just want to be the best, you want to be the best for your entire career, right? That's what it's all about. So I'm going to give you a bit of an introduction to kind of clean sport in general. We've done a little bit of talking about the thought process behind things, but there's a lot more to clean sport. So does anyone recognize these guys? Yeah? World Anti-Doping Agency, got a show of hands for anyone that recognizes them? Yeah? You just watched a video about it. Yeah? So these guys are quite important, yeah? These guys make every single rule they make all of the clean sport rules in every single sport in every part of the world, right? These guys manage everything. These guys manage the athlete rules. These guys manage the labs that all your tests go to. These guys manage the national anti-doping organizations. These guys are busy people, yeah? Now, I could sit here and talk to you about them for about 6 or 7 hours, but I've not got that much time. So we'll focus on the stuff that is actually important to the people we're talking to, which is the anti-doping rules, yeah? So these are the ones that are applicable to athletes and coaches and, I suppose, immediate entourage as an athlete. Now, can anyone ever guess how many anti-doping rules there are? I know we've got some Olympians in the room. I'd be interested if they know. I won't embarrass anyone, it's okay, don't worry. There's 11. There's more than most people think, yeah? So I'll run through them all quickly. I won't go too deep into each of them because they all, they're quite a big thing. So number 1, presence. That is the presence of a prohibited substance in an athlete's urine sample. Quite simply, that's if you test positive, right? That's a rule violation. That's a rule, don't do that. Use or attempted use. This one's an interesting one because a lot of people don't realize that you don't have to actually test positive to get convicted of doping, right? If someone can prove that you've used or attempted to use performance-enhancing drugs or break the rules, then that's still exactly the same. It's an anti-doping rule violation. Oh, and on another note, down the bottom it says ADRVs, yeah? This is what everyone calls them in sport. I don't know why they call them because it just makes no sense to me. Just call them anti-doping rule violations. We all know what they are rather than using an acronym. But that's what most people will call them to you. Number 3, evading, refusing, or failing to do a test. So if you decide that, well, I'm just not going to take that test, that's exactly the same as you testing positive, right? That's not an acceptable thing. You're going to get treated exactly the same as the person that's taken a steroid, for example. Number 4, you've got the failure to log your whereabouts information. Now, I don't think there'll be many athletes here on the whereabouts system, but to give you an overview of what it is, when you get to the upper echelons of your sport, you will have to log your whereabouts for 1 hour of every single day all year. It's a big part of an athlete's career, and it's can be quite frustrating, but it is a really big thing that you get 3 strikes, and if you make a mistake 3 times, then that's an anti-doping rule violation. So later on in your guys' career, you'll probably go through some training for that, but that's also a big part of the upper echelons of sport. Next up, you've got tampering. So that is, if you go into a doping control center, you'll have lots of these things around, right? So there'll be lots of testing kits, there'll be lots of vessel collection kits, right? Now, the only person that's allowed to touch those is the athlete, yeah? So if you've got a coach with you, they're not allowed to be picking your test kit up, they're not allowed to be doing anything like that, it's just the athlete. Now, you're also not allowed to tamper with things after the fact, So this is like getting in the way of the testing procedure. That is an anti-doping rule violation. Now, number 6 is a simple one, possession. Just like how it's really not a good idea to possess illegal drugs in day-to-day life, you can't possess performance-enhancing drugs in sport either. You're going to get in exactly the same amount of trouble for possession as you will for having it in your blood system. Number 7, trafficking, exactly the same as real life again. you can't traffic performance-enhancing drugs, you're going to get an anti-doping rule violation, right? Administration or attempted administration of a performance-enhancing drug. This one is equally focused on coaches as well as it is on athletes. So if a coach administered a performance-enhancing drug to someone, they're in equally as much trouble as the athlete, for example. Now, all of these actually apply to coaches and athletes, but particularly that one is one to remember. Complicity or attempted complicity. So basically, if you've got intent to do something bad, yeah, you're going to be in trouble. That's also an anti-doping rule violation. Prohibited association. This is one that some people get caught up on. So if you've got a strength and conditioning coach at the gym, and he's been banned from sport for, let's say, steroid use with another athlete 2 years ago, but he's still on a 4-year ban, you are not allowed to associate with them from a sporting perspective. That is an anti-doping rule violation. You'll get in big, big trouble for it. A lot of people forget about that one, so try and remember that one. And number 11 is discourage or retaliate speaking up about drugs in sport. So this one is to protect whistleblowers, right? So this is a really, really key one. A large part of what we do in terms of keeping athletes safe now is actually investigating what people tell us. So yes, we catch people from testing, but we catch a lot more people from people speaking up about what's going on in sport, so whistleblowers, basically. And if someone's found to be discouraging or retaliating or not letting someone speak up, it's an anti-doping rule violation. Now, guys, this bit is the one thing. If you take one thing from this presentation, this is what I need you to take away. This is quite possibly the most important thing for an athlete, right? So this thing is the strict liability principle. I'll read through its definition, and then I'll give you a bit of an example as to why it's so important. So the athlete is solely responsible for anything which is found in their body, regardless of whether or not there is any intention there, right? So even if you don't know you've taken something, and it was a complete accident, the athlete is the one that is responsible for a positive test because of that. So it's the same thing with supplements. It's the same thing if you go to the doctors and get some, you've got a cold and you take some medicine for it and it's not been checked and it turns out that you're not allowed it, that's your fault. That is your problem, not the doctor's problem. Everything in your body is your own problem, and that's something you've got to remember across absolutely everything through your entire career. Not knowing is not an excuse, okay? So this one's always an interesting one. So do you guys know what products are prohibited in your sport? And it varies across lots of different sports. It varies across cycling compared to rugby, compared to taekwondo. It's all slightly different for different sports. And what we have is a really big, complicated book that no one understands to explain it all. It's really hard. There is not a single person in this room or even at WADA that knows every piece of information in this book. I promise you that, right? So basically everything in here is in here because it meets 2 out of 3 of these criteria, right? So number 1, it has the potential to enhance or does enhance sport performance. It represents an actual or potential health risk to an athlete, or it violates the spirit of sport. Now, please see that it only needs to hit 2 of these to be banned in sport. It doesn't need to be all 3, okay? Now, like I said, no one knows this book. It's a chunky book. We're talking like big, chunky piece of material. So how is it that we find out what we can and can't take? Well, this is what we do. So first of all, what I want you guys to do, if you're going to a doctor or you're going to a pharmacist or whoever you're going to get health requirements from, ask the doctor or pharmacist if what they're prescribing is allowed in sport. Get them to check the WADA checklist. It's part of their job. They have to do it. Now, I say that with caution because a couple of slides ago, I also said the principle of strict liability. Just because a doctor said it's okay, it is still your responsibility to check it. Always your own responsibility. Next up, we've got check with your national anti-doping organization or with the International Federation of your sport. So, for example, for me, I was a resident in New Zealand at the time. So for me, it was Drug-Free Sport New Zealand. And my international federation was the UCI, which is the people that look after cycling, right? Both of these places would be able to tell me what I can take and what I can't take. And finally, there is the resource that I use mostly myself. I found this the easiest to use. I found it took me about 30 seconds and was so much simpler than trying to sift through a massive book. I highly recommend it to absolutely everyone, whether or not you're buying medicine from the shop or whether you're getting medicine from a doctor. Absolutely always check it here. So, guys, if anyone's got a phone, I want you to grab it out. I want you guys to put this web address in your phone. So it's www.globaldro.com. Right? So the first page you'll get to, it will basically ask you what country you're from. Click on the country, or if your country's not listed, just click on Other. It's then going to ask you what sport you do, because like I said, certain drugs are allowed in certain sports, and some aren't in others. And then you're going to have a search bar. Right? Now, I hope you guys were listening to the last 1 minute, because I'm about to give you a quiz, and you're going to get it wrong if you don't have this up. So, we're going to have a little quiz. This is called Is This Allowed? If you really want a challenge, you can try and figure it out without using global DRO. Okay? So this is the first one. This is a painkiller. It's from America. It's an American-based kind of painkiller, so you may not have it here, but just think of it as a standard over-the-counter painkiller. It's called Tylenol. What are we thinking? Are we thinking it's allowed in sport, or are we thinking it's not allowed in sport? So if everyone thinks that it is allowed in sport, raise your hand. 2, 3, 4. What are we seeing? What are we saying? I'm going to say about 50% of people are thinking that. Cool. Right. 50% of you got it right. So 50% of you haven't got global DRO up, right? So let's get that one up. Let's put the web page on. And you're going to keep searching these, right? So we've got another one. This one is a medicine you would take if you had a cold or a cough or a headache, something like that. You do not have to go to a doctor to get it. You can get it from the shop. You can get it from a supermarket. They're completely readily available. What are we thinking? I'll give you a few seconds to put it in global DRO for those giving it a go. All right, so a show of hands if it is allowed in sport. Good, you guys are learning. There's not a single hand up in here. Well done. So it is not allowed in sport. This one is because it's got ephedrine in it. But you can see what I mean. It's really important to check everything you take, because this is something you can, you might just have in the kitchen cupboard and have because you're not feeling great. If you had that when you're out racing or competing, you're in serious trouble. You're going to be in for 2 to 4 years banned just because you've had that by accident. So next up, this one is an asthma inhaler. So a lot of athletes are asthmatic, so this is a fairly common one. I'll let you guys put it into global DRO. I'll give you a few seconds. I'll give you a hint. It's a bit harder, this one. Yeah. All right. So who thinks it's allowed in sport? I've got some shaky hands. I've got a few shaky hands. Yeah, maybe. Okay. Well, you're all kind of right. There's no right or wrong here, right? So, some things have got special conditions attached to them. And you'll see these listed on the Global DRO website, or you'll also see it on WADA or anywhere you're checking your medications. Some have a certain amount of, like a certain quantity you're allowed to take. So inhalers, for example, certain inhalers you might be able to have 20 puffs a day, others you can have 80 puffs a day, but there is a limit. if you then tested and had more than that limit in your system, that then becomes a banned substance, right? So you've got to be aware some things are a bit complicated. Now, this one is a little bit of a trick question, I'll give you that. So it is not a medicine, it is a supplement, right? So it is called muscle strength. It is something that's got a lot of BCAAs in it, proteins. It is also used as a recovery kind of supplement. So what are we thinking? Is this allowed in sport or is this not allowed in sport? Exactly. That's the first thing you're going to ask. What are the ingredients? Now, this leads me on to the next subject of this. You can never be sure of the ingredients. You don't know what's in a supplement, right? So, yes, you can look on the back of a supplement and you have an ingredients list, right? It should all be there. Absolutely. The problem is you can never trust it. Because if there is something in that, and you test positive for something and it turns out that that's not what it says it is, because of the strict liability problem, it's going to be your problem still, right? So supplements you have to be so careful with, right? Even the ones that are Informed Sport accredited, some of you guys might have heard of those ones. Those are ones that are batch tested, so you can trace them right back to the factory. Yes, they are significantly safer than products that haven't been batch tested, but it doesn't make them 100% safe, yeah? So always check your supplements, and my general advice is only use a supplement if you can't do anything better with food. You know, a food-first approach is by far the best. So in terms of the supplements, like we said, mislabeling. Sometimes the labels aren't even correct. The amount of times that I've kind of gone through conversations with people and they've been done for doping without even knowing it, without even intentionally doing anything, it's a terrifying concept. Contamination. Factories that are making supplements don't make one supplement. They make vast amounts of different supplements, right? That same factory line has had, let's say, 20 different supplements go through it that one day. Now, if that one other supplement that has been made on that line is a banned supplement, you're risking contamination, even though it's not, in theory, in that product. And then finally, obviously, you've got health risks associated with that. So I guess my takeaway here is, regardless of whether or not a certain supplement is banned or not, and more often the supplements aren't banned, there is no 100% risk-free supplement. So always remember that. Like I say, my go-to when I was still doing sport was a food-first approach. That is probably the only way that you can be 100% certain that your supplement is clean, is by not using a supplement. 9 out of 10 times, it can be done by proper diet. So if you've got your carbohydrates, your proteins, your fats, your vitamins, your minerals, there's all these things. If you do a little bit of research, you'll be able to find the foods that meet the same requirements as a supplement. Yeah? So important. And I agree there are certain times that you do need to take a supplement. If you've got specific needs, if you've got an iron deficiency or whatever it may be, there are certain times where a supplement is a better approach than food. But always try and use food where possible. So this is the fun bit, right? So this is the bit that I was talking about right at the very start, where it took me 2.5 hours to pee. It was really embarrassing. Didn't really enjoy it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to show you that process so you guys know what to expect when eventually it does happen. Now, I can see a few weird looks. I'm not going to pee on a stage. It's okay. I've come prepared. I've come prepared with some apple juice, so we're all good. We are all sorted on this front. But one thing I do want to mention before we go into this demonstration is how you get selected for these tests. Because I've witnessed athletes be not particularly nice people to doping control officers when they feel like they're being unfairly treated, right? I do a lot of training for control officers. I know both sides of the story. And the common problem is that athletes don't actually know the reasons why they're being tested, right? So there's three ways you could potentially get chosen for testing. Number one is based on your performance. So let's say, for example, we've pre-decided in advance that the top 3 of the competition are going to be taken for drug testing straight afterwards, right? So that's one way of doing it. The second way is random selection. That is where we will have a start sheet with all the different details and numbers and etc. on it. We will then get a random number generator, and we will literally pick, let's say, 3 completely random people off of a list. And the final one is targeted for a specific reason. Now, this is where we've got someone that's maybe given us some form of information, and we've started to target someone in particular. And this is where we sometimes hit problems with athletes, because sometimes they feel like they're being targeted, whereas realistically it might just be that they've won every race they've started for the past 6 months, so inherently they've been tested a lot more. So the way I like to remember it, and the way I've always been taught over my years in sport, was if I'm being tested, it's probably because I'm the best at what I do, right? Yes, there's other scenarios as well, but it's because you're the best at the best. Right, now for the fun bit. So I'm going to need, to start with, I'm going to need 2 volunteers, right? And these guys are going to be athletes. And I know we've got 1 ex-Olympian that I'd love to come and show us through this as well. So if you can pop up onto the stage, that would be fantastic. I need 1 more volunteer, if that's possible. Come on up. Now we need 1 more. Have we got any more volunteers, or am I going to start picking people randomly? Yeah? Come on then. Up you come. Come on. All right, so these 2 lovely people are going to be our athletes for today. They have just won gold and silver at the Olympics. I'm not going to tell them which one's won what, because I don't want to start an argument. But these 2 are going to be athletes. Now, as athletes, they are allowed another person with them throughout the doping control process, right? So they're allowed a support person. Now, this is particularly important if you're under 18. I think it's a good idea to have a support person with you the whole time. That person goes through the entire testing procedure, apart from when you're actually peeing into a cup, right? They're not allowed to watch that bit, but they're allowed to watch the rest of it. So now I need 2 more volunteers to be our athlete support personnel. Raise your hands. I'll start picking from the crowd. Here we go. Well done, guys. Now, don't worry. There's not going to be. I'm not going to make anyone try and speak English if English isn't your first language and stuff. This is purely to demonstrate things. I'm not going to make it all scary. I promise. Right? All right. Yeah. Round of applause for everyone that's volunteered. Thank you very much, guys. So, now we're going to have a race, but first of all, I'm going to be the doping control officer. So, this is essentially what you would be served in a doping control center, right? So, first of all, this is a doping control kit, right? This is eventually what your pee goes into. You also have one of these. This is a collection vessel. This is what you pee into, right? So, to start off with, the athlete, can they move forward, please? When an athlete gets pulled into the doping control station, they will be given 3 of everything. So you can see we've got 3 testing kits for each athlete, and the athlete is going to have to check to make sure they are all sealed in the plastic wrap. So if you guys just want to check they're all sealed, if you can pick one. Yeah, they're all somewhat sealed, yeah, looking fine. And then same thing with these vessels here. So you'll get given 3 to pick from. And again, it's the athlete that has to do the touching of all this stuff. No one else is allowed to touch it. Cool, and they're all looking sealed, so that's fantastic. Next up, I'll tell you what, before we go to the next bit, I will show you what it looks like inside of these before we start this race, okay? These are what these little glass bottles are inside these boxes, right? So there's 2 different tests. One is a B sample, and one is an A sample. And so does anyone know why we have two of them? No? I got lots of silence. That's expected. That's all right. So basically, we have two separate tests because they go to the lab. They get sent to the lab. We test the A sample. We will only test the A sample to start with. If we find anything bad in the A sample, we will then test the B sample. And that's just to prove that no one's tampered with it, right? You can't tamper with two. There's a potential someone could tamper with one. So those are what your sample vessels look like. Right. Okay, guys. So I'm going to read through all these for the simultaneous translation, so don't start yet. Right? So I'll just read through all of this to start with. So first of all, we've picked our urine collection vessels. We've picked the doping control kit. Next up, we're going to open the urine collection vessel package and take out all the contents. So they're going to open these boxes, basically. Next up, the athlete will get taken to the bathroom with the doping control officer. Now, for the sake of that, we've got apple juice because it's a bit of a long walk to the toilet. It's probably not great. So after that, we need to make sure there is 90 milliliters of wee in these things. So you'll see they've got numbers written on the side. 90 is about halfway up. That is the absolute minimum that you need for a urine test, yeah? So you can put, you go with 130 or something, that's absolutely fine, but the minimum you'll need is 90. So afterwards, make sure the lid's on properly, right? Please, because as a doping control officer, we really don't want wee going everywhere. It's not nice. It has happened, but it's not nice. So make sure the lid's on properly afterwards. After that, we're going to get our A and B samples. We're going to unwrap them. So they're covered in a plastic wrap to start with. And then underneath that, there is a red tab when you take the lid off. So that red tab stops them from locking. We're going to take those off as well. Finally, we're going to start pouring the test sample. We're going to start with the B sample. And they've got lines on to indicate how much you need to put in them. So that line there. Yeah? You then need to start with the A sample, which you'll see has got about twice as much in. So there's that line there. And then if you've got any left over, just pour the rest into the B sample. You're then going to screw these tops on. So if you guys look carefully, you'll see there's some metal teeth in here, and it is impossible to open these once they're locked. There is no way of getting them open without smashing them on the floor, or you can take them off with a special tool, and after that, we can see that they've been opened. So even if someone opens them with a special tool, there's big marks in the glass, so it's impossible for someone to get in there without us now seeing that someone's been in there. So you're going to seal those up. There's also a little plastic bag that they go in, so you then seal them into these plastic bags. You put them back in the box, and then lastly, this is very important, on these boxes you have numbers with barcodes on. Those numbers have to correspond with the numbers on here. Now, I've never seen one that doesn't correspond, but it is the athlete's responsibility to check that they do correspond, yeah? So always, always check. Right, I'll move all this stuff out of the way for you guys, and then we're going to have a race who can do that whole thing the fastest. And then I've got prizes for the people that can do it the fastest. So, is it? True. Should we swap round? That's a good idea. Yeah? Okay, right, we're going to swap things round because I've just been told she's done it hundreds of times as well, so it's probably not a good idea. She's a bit unfair. So, we're going to swap around. We've got one test kit, one sample kit. Take these ones away. One test kit, one apple juice, one sample kit. All right, guys. So that screen's got the whole process on there as well. If you've got any questions, you can ask the whole time. I'll give you a countdown. So in 3, 2, 1, go. Come on, guys. You've got to got some cheering. Got some clapping. That's it, nice work. Okay, so you want a minimum of 90 in there. It's okay to put more in, that's absolutely fine. It's always better to be safe than sorry, so pour a bit more in if that's possible. Just about enough, that's cool. I'd go with a little bit more, Fantastic, there we go. All right, so we're going to get those, next up you've got to put the lid on. So the lids go on here. Yeah, you want to make sure it's, like I said, super safe. We don't want anything going everywhere. All right, so we've got the seals off on the unit, so we're going to take the lids off. And then underneath there, you'll see a little red plastic tab. So that stops it from locking. So you want to take the red plastic tag off as well. Yeah? Cool. All right. No, don't. You've got to put the urine in yet. You don't want to lock it without putting the sample in. So you want to put this into this one. And you'll see on the side, they've got the lines that you need to pour up to. So 30 milliliters in that one. It's looking good. We've got some good results here so far. If you pour over the line, it's absolutely fine. It's okay to have too much. You don't want not enough. Yeah. So as long as you've got enough for both the B sample and the A sample still, then it's fine. Now you need to take the red plastic lips off because that's what stops it from. That's it, that first one's all locked on, all sorted. So nice and tight as you can. It's getting close, we're very, very close here. It's going to be a race to the plastic bags, so you've got to put them in the plastic bag and then seal them up in the boxes. So you want to peel the blue tab back, and it will have like a sticky element underneath. So you peel the blue bit, because you peel that bit off. All right, looks like we've got some winners. Keep going though. All right, I suppose I should probably check it now as well. Have we got all the right amounts? It's all packaged nicely. Spot on. B sample's looking good. A sample's looking even better. All righty, I think we've got some winners there. Did you check the numbers on it though? Yeah? Sorted then. Good stuff. You can drink the rest if you like. I don't recommend that in an actual test though. Yeah. That's it, nice work. Stick it down. You get them in the boxes. And now you want to check the number here is the same as the number here, which it looks like it's, yeah, perfect. Cool. So at that point, they'll all get sealed and it gets sent off to a special lab. But we're going to talk about that a different day. So we've got some winners on the far side of here, so round of applause for the winners. Well done. And here's a few things I prepared earlier. So we've got some ITA water bottles. You can have some water bottles. There's for your apple juice. All right, guys. Thank you so much for your guys' participation. You guys did fantastically. Yeah, all sorted. All right, guys. Thank you very much. All right. All right. So I know we're getting towards the end of things now. I'm running rapidly out of time, so I'll try to tie things up. So I'm hoping most of you guys have now got a bit of an understanding around the importance of the values of clean sport. I know at the start, well, those are the things we talked about at the start with your idols, that kind of thing. I hope you now understand the moments where you're a bit more vulnerable as well. Those times you've really got to focus about those values. You've had a bit of an overview of the anti-doping system. I know that's it's a big system. It's going to take a lot more than an hour to understand that. But you've now understood like, the basics of that. You understand which rules apply to athletes. So those are your 11 ADRVs, or anti-doping rule violations. Those are really, really important. You know what the prohibited list, that's the big chunky book that no one knows about. And you know where to check it all. That's the really important bit. You know where to check things. And you've understood the basics of the doping control station, which is this stuff over here. So guys, I'll start to tie things up here. Has anybody got any questions they'd like to ask in turn as well? I know a lot of these things are somewhat private, so if you do want to ask questions in private, you can either come see me afterwards, or there are also some questions. You can email me there as well. It's completely anonymous. I don't need to know anyone's name. That's absolutely fine. So if you've got things you'd like to know, hit me up on there or pop down and see me afterwards. That's absolutely fine. I do ask one thing of you guys, though. If you can take a picture of that QR code and fill out that survey online, it basically goes on to so we can see who's gone through the education and who's participating and that kind of thing. And it's like a big check mark against you guys as you're doing the right thing. So that helps us out massively. So guys, that brings me up to the end of things today. Like I said, if you've got any questions, ask away now. I'll be down the front for the next hour or so as well. And I'll be dotted around the event for the next 2 or 3 days. So hopefully I'll get to meet you in person as well. Anyone that's online as well, I'd love to meet you guys, so hopefully I'll see you over the next few days. If not, it's been fantastic being here. It's been fantastic being given the opportunity to speak to some of our, essentially the new leaders of the upcoming generation of sport. It's you guys that are going to be steering sport over the next 20, 30 years. It's a huge, huge thing for us, and we appreciate being able to come down and talk to you guys as well. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your guys' week here as well. Cheers.